Welcome, Tribers. Cyberlink here. Today's date is November 3rd, 2011, and you know what that means. Closed beta starts tomorrow. If you're excited, and some of you have even gotten to enjoy some of the pre-system tests we've had the last couple of days. That being said, now that a larger population has seen Ascend, more questions have been asked. Which brings me to today and another interview with Todd Hirez. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, good to be here.
Alright, let's get started. First issue, or first section would be system tests. Where are the issues found, the system tests, were they addressed?
Yeah, they were addressed. So we did the system test because obviously we expect to find issues. We know we're going to have some issues in CBT as well, but we wanted to get the biggest ones out of the way with a little smaller population. So to us, the most critical thing is trying to make sure players can play. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than if you're just not getting into matches, and then next most frustrating would be poor performance in matches. So in system test, we knocked out a bunch of good issues in that regard. The first system test, players were seeing really crappy ping at the beginning of the test, and actually we have technology that monitors the load on different match servers, and so when you're doing pub play, your match will be hosted on a server that has the most capacity and can also give you good ping. And at the very beginning of that first system test, there was actually a bug, and we had all matches for a region going to a single server. So all US was literally playing on a single server machine. So it's amazing that it actually ran at all, to be honest. But we fixed that, and that was a great bug, and now we can take advantage of the multiple servers that we have. And then in the second system test, it ran really smooth for a lot of players, but some players could get into a state where they would basically be stuck at a loading screen or stuck at the queue loading, either at the queue screen or the match loading screen. That happened to me at home when I was trying. It was really frustrating. And we've addressed that as well, or at least a couple of the issues that could have caused that. Hopefully we found all of them. So it was really good that we were able to identify those. That's why we had the test. They've been fixed, and hopefully that puts us in a better position to have a smooth start of closed beta test.
Okay, so I take it y'all got a lot of good data back from those.
Yeah, really good data, mainly on the technical front, because that was our first mission. Also got some good data, for the designers around balance. Nothing really surprising. We did share some of that on the forums, at least some of kind of the highlights and accolades that I think Scott shared out there. So nothing really surprising, but just kind of confirmed our assumptions as far as how fast people would progress and that sort of thing.
Did any major things stick out? I mean, like metrics or otherwise?
No surprises in terms of major balance tweaks based on the metrics, but again, that's really something that we expect to do more in closed beta tests. So systems test was really around finding and fixing those technical issues, so it was successful from that standpoint.
Okay. Let's drop down to the closed beta testing questions. Have the servers changed, the locations any? I mean, are y'all still sticking to the previous interviews answer for those?
Yeah, as far as locations, we've added servers, obviously, but as far as geographies, really, for this initial phase, our focus is the U.S., and that includes East Coast servers and West Coast California servers, as well as Europe and as well as Australia. So those are still the major markets and server locations for this first phase.
Okay. Will y'all be using the ELO system for CBT?
Not in this initial phase, at least not heavily. So really ELO, and I think there's we can get into that maybe later, but it mainly comes into play with ranked servers, and we've announced that in this first phase we're not going to have ranked servers, although we will have them in a later phase.
Do y'all have a roadmap for dates and times for like CBT to OBT or anything?
Not yet. Since we're just starting CBT tomorrow, it would be premature to announce a firm date for open beta testing. So we'll know a lot more after the first few weeks of closed beta testing, and we can probably set some expectations then, but nothing to announce at this time.
All right. On to development. Are you guys happy with the game progression so far?
Yeah, we are happy. It was just a little over a year ago that we first acquired the Tribes franchise, so we just celebrated that anniversary, and then really looking over the past year, in January is when we made the internal decision to focus on Tribes Ascend as a multiplayer ahead of Tribes Universe as a larger, more MMO. And then in the spring at PAX East, we announced TA publicly with the teaser video. And then in August, we had it playable for the first time at trade shows like PAX Prime. And now we're entering CBT tomorrow, just about a year after acquiring the franchise. So real happy. Think the dev team, I certainly feel good about the progress that they've made, and I think they're proud of what they've been able to develop over the past year. So
cool. What's the studio's big picture for Ascend and the future of tribes in general?
Wow. Well, big picture, I think that there's two things I would highlight. One, just as far as the process, this may surprise folks, but we do want to work really closely with the community. I mean, I think that we probably candidly didn't get off to the best start with tribes of veterans, because when we announced, hey, the game's free to play and the game's going to be class-based, a lot of veterans, felt like that was a big bucket of cold water dumped on them. And we've been firm around those major decisions around free to play and class-based, and that affects a lot of other things. But aside from those big things, we're soliciting a ton of input and actually taking a lot of that input. And maybe at the end, if we don't have specific questions, we can just talk about that, and I can kind of summarize all the community feedback that we've taken that people will actually see in beta, because I think that'd be interesting for folks. And we want to continue that process because there is a lot of good knowledge there that we can benefit from. So working with the community is more of a process thing. And then big picture for Ascend, my vision is really that it should be the ultimate esport. I mean, and by that I mean a couple things. One, there's a lot of comparisons on the forums around tribes as a sport, or specifically like soccer. I really like that analogy because of the different roles and how fluid soccer is, and the motion back and forth and the ball sense and all that. So I believe that the gameplay does have a lot of analogies with soccer, but also soccer is just played at various levels. I mean, my son started playing when he was 4, and obviously it's played at a very competitive level also, and that's really where I would like to see Ascend is, there's no single player campaign in the game for a reason. We focused on the multiplayer, and we've recently, announced at least some intent around formal esports sort of activities, and we'll have more announcements on that front. So we want to see it played by millions worldwide at a very casual level, and also by a smaller population at a very competitive level, and that's really the big picture for Ascend.
That sounds good, and a lot of people out there are going to like that.
Cool.
Let's see, next question. Well, I'm pulling this directly from the forums. With the overwhelmingly positive feedback of the retooled chain gun, will Hirez move to a more high-speed projectile approach instead of hit scan?
So that's obviously a hot topic on the forums and internally, and we have communicated that there's a number of weapons that have moved to projectile. As you said, the chain gun is in that category. The Nova Colt is currently a projectile. One of the SMGs is projectile based. So, I think at this point what we can say is that we're going to very carefully monitor the usage of those weapons and the performance of those weapons, the effectiveness of those weapons compared to some of the hit scan weapons. And there are still a few hit scan weapons in the game, although less than there were in alpha. So I agree, it's an area that the community was generally vocal about. Again, fundamentally, I would say we don't see that hit scan means fail within Tribes Ascend, but we're certainly looking at weapons on an individual basis, and willing to try projectile versions of those, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, we did notice hit scan changed a little bit. Can you go into a little detail on how y'all changed it?
Well, it's really just the particular weapons that that I mentioned, moving from hit scan to fast projectile. I mean, there may be other elements of hit scan with tracers or things that give a different visual appearance that we could look at. But at this point, other than general improvements around basically compensating for lag and latency that we're always working on ongoingly, it was just those particular weapons moving to fast projectiles versus instant fire hit scan.
Okay. Do the guys, the dev team and stuff like that, do they play the previous Tribes games still, or are y'all stuck on TA?
Well, I'd say before we even acquired the franchise, as we've shared, we had some devs that were very familiar with the game, and then during pre-production, we would have studio-wide playtests of really all the old variations, T1, T2, and TV. I don't think we did any aerial assault, but we played those as a studio multiple times. Now that we're really in production, most of the time people are just referring to the older games as reference or doing research, around a very tactical thing where they want to look at that as reference. I know Mick does that a lot since he's involved in a lot of the physics-based code work. So that's mainly how the older games are being used. And to be honest, it's a time thing. Every day they come in and they look at a giant screen counting down the clock that you guys see on the Tribes Ascend homepage. It's about to drop under the 24-hour moment. So they've been looking at that for the past month, and that drives a lot of focus on Tribes Ascend. They haven't had a chance to play much else over the last month.
Okay. I know a lot of the newbies and stuff will be using the technician class. I mean, is that going to get reworked? I mean, for example, switching, say, the repair gun to like a pack slot instead of a weapon slot and giving it something else. Maybe also letting the turrets, persist through death, and have like a team amount.
There's no change plan to that right now. It is one of the more, you could say, unusual or distinctive classes, depending on how you look at it. In that it only has one weapon, so certainly players that feel constrained with two in-hand weapons, if you're going down to one and a repair gun, I understand the perspective that they may feel that class is not fun to play. On the other hand, that turret can be pretty powerful. So it's a class that we're going to look a lot at in terms of, once we start closed beta testing people, it becomes real, since we're maintaining progression in this phase. And so it's going to be a lot more of a deliberate choice what players choose to unlock, and then once they unlock, what they choose to play. And so not only for the technician, but across the board, we're going to be looking at those usage stats and effectiveness stats, and the technician is one we'll certainly keep a close eye on, since it is a bit different from the rest. But right now, there's no plans to change it.
All right. I know this is kind of small, but any particular reason we can't aim directly down?
You can. Tomorrow, you will be able to aim directly down. So that is one of the many things in the bucket of thanks for the feedback, and we've changed it. So based on feedback in closed beta, you're going to be able to aim directly down. It is not rumors to the contrary. There was no limitation with the Unreal 3 engine preventing looking down. In fact, to almost any question, there's no limitation with the Unreal 3 engine. Some things are harder, some things are easier. We couldn't do infinite terrain with Unreal 3, but just about anything else, we have the source code, and we have a lot of smart engineers, and it's just a matter of prioritizing time on what's going to make the game most fun, and you can now aim down, so go for it.
All right, next question, more of a balanced question, I guess. But will energy be tweaked? I mean, faster regen, longer use?
So that's another area where, since the last test, we have actually tweaked the jetpacks to use less energy, which is not exactly the same as faster regen, but certainly affects that. So we will keep an eye on that. I would not say that the current regen time is at all locked in, but we also don't want to change too many variables. With a lot of these things, we try to change one thing and then do a test and then continue. So since we've tweaked the jetpacks to use slightly less energy, we want to see how that behaves, and we'll continue to keep an eye on regen time.
All right. Have you guys looked into adding shields to personal turrets? I mean, they used to in T1, T2. They both had an energy, or the turret had an energy pool, which it drew its firepower from, as well as its shield. So you could shoot the turret; it would stop firing as much. Any thought on that?
Well, I know that the design and dev team have looked again at the treatment in the older games and are familiar with that. No activity on that at the moment. I mean, I would just say within Tribes Ascend, I think the balance of personal turrets is just right. I don't think anyone would necessarily say they need to be harder to take out, or they would need to require more specialized weapons to take out. Something like that might make sense for more of a team-wide turret, whether it's the base turret or some other defense that could be deployed. But on an individual weapon like the personal turret, they feel about right now. So I'd never say never, but it's not something that we're actively looking at.
All right. I guess this kind of ties into one of the previous questions, but thrust vectoring, can it be tuned, more directional force for the cost of lift?
Possibly. We just added jump, as you're probably aware. We added jump fairly recently after alpha, and then we've tweaked it significantly as well based on feedback, which is a way to get more lift and and affects certainly lift, which is different than thrust vectoring. But again, we want to see how that plays out first before we look at changing any directional thrust or vectoring.
Okay. Will there be a stat tracking site like GA for Ascend?
Most definitely. We want to offer very robust player stats. Again, to the sports analogy, people want to see their stats. They want to see how they compare against other people around the world or in a smaller pool, like maybe a clan. So there will be. We don't have a date for it. It will most likely be a web-based solution, so it could be viewable, in-game or out of game from other viewpoints as well. But that's a very high priority for us.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to gameplay. How's the ELO system going to work? I mean, that's a big question, but a lot of people are kind of curious and don't quite know what that means.
Yeah, so I think there's more that we'll say later, because at this point in this phase, we're not going to have ranked servers. Tomorrow we turn on beta. Actually, today there's a sneak peek at 4 o'clock, which people may or may not have heard about, but check your high command, because at 4 o'clock you could get a head start. And then on Friday they come on officially, and we'll only have public queues initially. Then we'll add VIP queues, down the road. Fairly aggressively, and then ranked servers will come after that. And at the high level, there will be a player ranking system that's similar to ELO or similar to the TrueSkill system that's on the Xbox as far as player ranking. And really, they all work similarly in that they're based on when you play in those ranked matches, do you win or do you lose, and who's on your team and who's on the opposite team, and how high are their player rankings. And so, ELO comes originally from ranking chess players, which is a one-on-one game. It's been adapted to other team games and including, a lot of multiplayer gaming. And so the high-level concepts are really, it's not subject to stat farming to mess up the system. I mean, regardless of what you do from an individual stat perspective, your player ranking ultimately comes down to how often you win and lose and what the conditions were around that win and loss. So it's a system that's worked in a lot of team-based games. No system's perfect, but it's pretty well developed, and we've taken those basic algorithms and adapted them for Ascend. So that's the general principle of what will happen with ELO and ranked servers.
Okay, so the newbies won't be safe for the CBT then?
Well, in CBT they'll be playing in public, and it'll be very, very lightly weighted in CBT. So in CBT, you will be playing in public servers. In this first phase, you will remain on a server and continue with the player group that you were put with, and we will depend on the grace and gentlemanly behavior of tribesmen to self-balance the teams and see how that works out. Meaning that if Blood Eagle is stacked every time and continues to be stacked, then we may have to introduce another system quickly. But in order to get players most quickly into matches, ELO is very lightly weighted in this first phase.
Okay. Will bases become more relevant? They're pretty useless as it stands.
Yeah, I don't agree that they're useless for pub play. I still think they're a pretty, cool concept and relevant concept for pub play. And, I've talked about this before, but back to the soccer analogy and the competitive, the different competitive plays, we've shared that we want to have flags around base play. So for players that feel like, for instance, when your base and generator is down, you shouldn't be able to change your loadout. I think that's a cool idea. I don't think it would add to the pub play experience. I think it'd be frustrating. I know some of the early Tribes mods even, changed that related to a number of players that were online. So I think for pub play it doesn't work, but I think it's a great candidate for private servers. And as you know, we've got a competitive thread in the beta forums, underneath the beta forums, where people can suggest what rules they think would be best for official tournament play, and that is probably a great example of something that could make bases more important for competitive and tournament play, and we're very open to other elements. So just like my soccer, my son, they didn't call offsides when he was playing when he was 4. He's now 8, and they actually call offsides, and offsides is an official tournament rule, but it wasn't there in the very first time people get a taste of soccer. So that's kind of the way we think about bases.
Okay. Why were airstrikes included? I mean, when historically offense was used to clear defense.
I think the intent was just to have additional hero moments or opportunities. So even in a team-based game, you want to have hero moments, and there's a lot of things that have always existed in Tribes to give that. Airstrikes were intended as another one of those. We'll watch the balance of them and make sure that they're not overpowered, but it feels like it's just an additional tool that players can have at their disposal. And I think, again, after players on the other side will learn to compensate and not necessarily be clustered right around the flag, to make that an easy sort of one-button win solution. But it's something we'll keep watching.
Okay. Will the new loadouts coming out include current weapons and packs, or are they going to be new ones?
Probably a combination. Most people, me included, would be more excited to play a loadout if it featured a brand new weapon. So I think that's the ideal case, and that's what we'll try to do. At the same time, there's probably some things in between, like a variant of a weapon. We have 3 different variants of the spin fuser. They're all pretty popular, so you may also see that, which are variants with a new model, but it kind of falls within the same archetype as an existing weapon.
Okay. Any chance the shock lance is going to make a return?
When evaluating new weapons, I'd say we'll definitely look at any weapon from the Tribes franchise that isn't currently in Ascend and see if it can fit. So the shock lance is not particularly high or low on the list, but it's one we'll take a look at.
Okay. During CBT, are there going to be any new game modes added further down the line?
Not during this first phase. We really want to get the balance right around the existing game modes, particularly capture the flag, and that's our first priority. So adding a new game mode obviously adds complexity around figuring out the balance. So we will add new game modes eventually, but not during this first phase.
All right. Will options be made to allow for UI customization, changing stuff around, because not everyone likes just the standard HUD we get?
It's not a short-term priority, so it's I appreciate players wanting customization there. It's something we could look at in the future, but not on the short-term list.
Okay. Is there any system set up so far for clan tags? I mean, are we going to be able to represent our teams and stuff like that in CBT?
Definitely, yeah. I would say definitely before release, whether it's in CBT or before OBT, is a little fuzzy, but a clan system is very high priority for us, and that would include having some amount of tagging or identification in-game.
All right. Are you guys still set on not providing VoIP for the servers? I mean, I'm sure y'all have vendors and partners and stuff you're going to be leasing out to, but I remember you said in one of the previous interviews that VoIP is not going to be not going to be provided by Hirez.
Not going to be integrated into the game.
Correct.
Right? Yeah, and that's still the same. Again, it just all comes down to priorities, and when we look at the list, there's other things that are more important since the VGS, voice systems in the game, and since there's so many providers out there, that have a lot of good functionality that are cheap or free for players that want to set that up. So having integrated voice is not a high priority for us.
Okay. Will the command screen make a return? Probably not in CBT, but later on down the line.
Yeah, not in CBT. That's something that we're going to prioritize, I would say, as part of the competitive suite of features. So there's numerous things, and again, a sub forum where we're going to look to community feedback on what's most important for that competitive community. And I think a command type screen would be helpful not only for the players but also from the standpoint of spectators and observers and commentators. When you look at esports and trying to navigate and depict for a watching audience what's going on in a very fast-paced game, so some screen like that would be helpful there. But it's probably not a this year time frame item.
Okay. Are there any plans to add the interim chat between matches?
Yes, I don't know actually where that is in the dev roadmap. I'd have to talk to the team, but it is an important feature. So we want that.
All right. I know a lot of people like chatting back and forth, talking about the game and saying did you see this this and that and stuff like that.
Definitely.
Will iron sights be added to some of the ballistic weapons and zooming be added to most of them?
Right now, zoom is more of a per weapon specific design decision, different from the older Tribes games. So right now, some of the weapons are more intentionally short range, including some of those remaining hit scan weapons, and so they intentionally don't have zoom, and they're really intended for short range. Right now, that's how we're looking at them. It's really a per weapon decision on whether zoom makes sense or not.
Okay. I guess onto the MTX system. Any idea how much loadouts are going to cost us in either like real world money, gold, or credits?
Yes, I can give you some guidance there. So, first, the two qualifiers, closed beta is all about us measuring and tweaking gameplay related stats like weapon balance, and it's also a good time for us to measure and tweak things like pricing. So everything I say is more around how we're going to start in closed beta. It might change, and two, of course, everything can be earned by playing the game if it affects the game versus purchasing. But I know, there's a lot of conversation around how much things are going to cost, and so the thought right now is that entering closed beta, the base non-discounted price for a loadout, or I'll just use the word class, for a class, which is a loadout, is 525 Tribes gold, so virtual currency of 525. And if I was just going to buy a single class a la carte, not buy anything else, not go for a bundle discount, not go for anything that was on sale, that would be about $7.50 of real money. But the thing is, you can't just do the math and say, oh wow, it's going to set me back, this huge amount to purchase all the classes, because when you buy in bulk, you get very large discounts. And rather than bundling up the classes, we basically just give you a discount on the gold so you can spend it the way you want. So real specifically, right now we're selling this VIP starter pack. So with that, you get 3,000 gold, which would be enough for 5 immediate class unlocks, day one. So you get your 2 free classes plus 5 classes, plus you get a boost and you have VIP status. So that's quite a lot of gameplay there, for your $30 basically. Another scenario is, let's say you just got a beta key, you haven't spent a dime, you're playing Tribes Ascend, you really like it, you're crazy about it, you can't wait, and you want to unlock all the classes. We would basically offer, a big discount on a $50 purchase of gold, which would get you over 6,000 gold. I think it's actually like 6,250 gold, which would be enough to buy all 10 classes, plus still have some gold and change that maybe you're saving, for a later skin or something. So that's the order of magnitude. So it's going to be more expensive if you're just buying one, and it's going to be less expensive if you're buying in bulk. And we plan to have sales and things from time to time too.
Okay. Are the maps still going to be free?
Yeah, the maps will be free in that we're not planning to charge DLC style for new map packs. We plan to do the development for new maps and include those. The qualification, I would say, is that we may reserve certain maps for certain server queues. So it's not the case that all maps will necessarily be in the public queue all the time. We may very well have additional maps that are specific to the VIP queue versus the public queue, but they won't be charged for separately as separate items.
Okay. What besides loadouts will be sold?
So loadouts, boosts, that lets you earn experience and or tokens faster, and cosmetic skins. The other thing we want to do are voice packs, so you have custom voice when you're using the in-game voice macro system. We will likely bundle the voice pack with the skin, although we're not 100% on that, but that's the current direction, is that you could buy a skin and it would have some number of voice overrides along with it, so your Shazbot sounds different from my Shazbot if you choose to do that. The other thing that's sold is VIP status.
Will that be sold after CBT?
Yeah, we will definitely have some way to purchase VIP beyond CBT, but right now in CBT we're definitely trying to give players a big incentive to go VIP, because during this closed beta phase, anytime a player purchases anything, it might even be, let's just say, a $10 package of gold, then they gain VIP status permanently for their account. So whatever they purchase, the first dollar they spend with us, they gain VIP status, which will stay through other beta phases, open beta, and release. And that may or may not continue beyond CBT, but if we don't have that, we'll have some way for players to get VIP.
Okay. Are you guys open to the idea of changing gold to Shazbucks? I know a lot of people are talking about that.
I would say we're open. Gold is. I understand.
It seems generic.
Yeah, there's good and bad. Players understand it because most free-to-play games call it gold, which is the reason that we went with gold. It's kind of like not changed too much. Shazbucks has a nice ring to it. I don't know. Maybe if we get like 100,000 likes by a certain day, we'll do it. But right now, there's no plans. I'd have to think about that one.
Okay, well, keep that in mind, because we may be able to get some likes like that later on. All right. So big question. You and I kind of talked about it off the air, I guess. The Grace +1 thread in our post in my thread. Can you go into some detail on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I read the thread. Again, I understand where people are coming from with the ball sense weapons and momentum-based gameplay and specifically predictive type weapons. So definitely understand that. I think many of our classes are currently Grace +1 in that. There's 3 versions of Spin Fuser. We have Arcs Buster, we have Bolt Launcher, we have Grenade Launcher. So there are quite a few of those weapons in there, and so I think most of the classes you would classify as a Grace +1, but certainly not all of them. Again, the biggest outlier would be the Technician, I would say, because there's not a graceful weapon, or in other words, a slow projectile-based weapon on that class. So really then the question is, will those classes not feel good to the player, or will they feel good? I know some forum posters feel, there's a worry that those classes may feel completely helpless, in a situation, is what I've seen a lot. And obviously we don't want that. So, Technician is more specialized currently. Players may come up with very emergent, creative ways to use it. If they do feel frustrated by it, we'll see that in the stats, because over time people will not buy it, or they will not use it. So I like the Grace +1 as a template of what could make good classes now or in the future, but I wouldn't say that we are going to constrain ourselves to that right now. So it's a good guideline, but we'll have a few that are outliers that don't follow that, like the Technician, and we'll watch during closed beta and see if players gravitate to those or do not.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about the community feedback stuff. What were you talking about?
Just as far as like specific suggestions from the community.
Right. That y'all have seen, that y'all have been talking about. And stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think since alpha, I mean, a bunch of things. The things that come to mind are, well, I mentioned Jump. So Jump wasn't in the game. We added a version of Jump based on feedback. We then have refined it based on more feedback, even adding like a very flexible keybind customization system so people can do it separately or do it with Jump if they want to combine it with the ski function, or more combine it, or that is the space bar, or more combine it with the jetting, so it's kind of your right click to jump jet, or have it be separately. So that's one big system that's been introduced really entirely based on community feedback. You know, a lot of things around individual weapons like refire time, the spin fuser time felt off to folks. We had tried to match it to tribes, specifically tribes 2, but it was off a little bit, so that got decreased on the spin fuser and really all the spin fuser like weapons. That was a really good suggestion. We've talked already about projectile weapons, increasing the number of projectile based weapons, which was a result of community. Small things like even the the model size on the heavy, because there was feedback that it was harder to distinguish that model and maybe less useful for body blocking. Decreased jetpack energy consumption. What else? Even tweaks to individual weapons. The chain gun got tweaked recently based on 2 very specific posts. Reloading on putting away weapons. If the weapon's been put away long enough, it gets automatically reloaded. So just a lot of things that we've already, before closed beta, adjusted based on feedback that have been great suggestions. So really, I think we just want to continue having that sort of interaction and make the game better in that way, while still remaining pretty firm around the fundamental things we want to do with Ascend, which includes free-to-play and the class-based approach. But there's a lot of room for improvement and cooperation under those things.
All right. Is the friends list going to be working? I mean, I know that we've, since we don't have our own private servers yet, that one of the big things is everyone wants to play with each other in the game. Is the friends list working efficiently?
I think it is, but to be honest, I haven't tested it in the build that we just put together. So I would have to check with Kerry, our QA guy. If it's not working, it'll be a very high priority to get that working in a near-term patch to close beta test, because that's certainly important.
Okay. Are there going to be multiple keybinds set up in game? Can we change between them? Because I know some people are lefties and some are righties.
There's no plans right now for multiple keybinds. Again, that's probably one of the nice-to-have features versus something that would be a big focus right now.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the community and stuff?
No, we're excited to play with you guys. Again, the big clock is counting down, and we're almost down to the last 24 hours. So excited about getting a lot of feedback, and for the group that is probably listening to this and most invested in the old Tribes games and hopeful, or maybe at least cautiously optimistic about Tribes Ascend. I would encourage that group to engage once they're in the beta in the competitive forum, because again, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to define together rules that make sense for the very highest level of play, that really emphasizes both individual player skill and teamwork, and also makes the game watchable and interesting to players. I see it as an opportunity where the best Tribes players in the world can hopefully be celebrities, the same way that's happening with other esports. Unfortunately, these days it's really just a few MOBA games. Counter-Strike is up there for a little bit, but it's really more games, like either StarCraft or starting to be League of Legends or Han, that are kind of starting to cultivate these real teams and personalities. But we would like to do that for the players and teams that are at that highest level. So I think we've got an opportunity to do that, particularly if we're working together on the rule set for those competitive events.
All right. Well, there you have it, Tribers. More answers to some of the popular questions. If you have any more questions, jump on the forums. A lot of people are already on there. You can send me a message if you need to, or catch me in the Mad6 TeamSpeak server. Thank you, Todd.
All right. Thanks, Cyberlink. See you in game.
All right. See you in the field, guys.